A millionaire CEO walks into a dog shelter for a blind date, expecting nothing. What he finds instead will destroy him and then save his life. Marcus Reid had everything except the one thing money couldn't buy. At 42, he ran a tech empire worth $300 million, lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city like a throne, and wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But every night when he came home, the silence swallowed him whole. His assistant Linda had set up the blind date as a joke. Or maybe as an intervention, he wasn't sure which. She'd been with him for 15 years and watched him become harder, colder, more isolated with every success. The instructions were weird though. Meet at Happy Tails Dog Shelter on Saturday at 2 p.m. Wear something casual and bring an open mind. Marcus almost canceled 3 times. He hadn't been on a date in 4 years. Not since Elizabeth left him, saying she felt like she was dating a corporation instead of a man. That comment had cut deeper than he'd ever admit. But something made him go. Maybe loneliness, maybe curiosity, maybe just the fact that Linda had never steered him wrong before. He pulled up in his Mercedes, immediately feeling out of place. The shelter was a small building with peeling paint and a hand-painted sign that had seen better days. Inside, it smelled like wet dog and disinfectant, and the sound of barking echoed off the concrete walls. A young woman at the front desk looked up and smiled. "You must be Marcus. She's waiting for you in the meet and greet room. 3rd door on the left." Marcus straightened his jacket. He'd worn the most casual thing he owned, which was still a $200 sweater, and walked down the hallway. His heart was pounding in a way it hadn't during any business deal. When he opened the door, the room was empty except for a German shepherd sitting calmly in the center, watching him with intelligent brown eyes. Marcus looked around, confused. "Hello?" No answer. He pulled out his phone to text Linda when he noticed an envelope, taped to the wall with his name on it. Inside was a note in handwriting he hadn't seen in 20 years but would recognize anywhere. "Marcus, if you're reading this, you actually showed up. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not here because I died 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and ugly. But I needed to tell you something before I went. And I knew you'd never take my call. You wouldn't even come to the hospital when I reached out. So I arranged this through Linda, who's a better friend to you than you deserve. The dog's name is Porter. He was mine. He's 3 years old, perfectly trained. And the only thing in this world that made my last year bearable. I'm leaving him to you, not because you want him, but because you need him. You've spent 20 years punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. You've built walls so high that nobody can reach you anymore. I know because I did the same thing after the accident. But Porter taught me something in my final months. Love isn't something you earn. It's something you allow. You don't have to be perfect to deserve it. You just have to be present. I forgive you, Marcus. I forgave you the day it happened. Now you need to forgive yourself. Take him home. Let him in. Maybe he'll teach you what he taught me. Your brother, Daniel." Marcus's hands were shaking, so hard the paper rattled. Daniel, his little brother, dead. 6 months in the ground, and Marcus hadn't even known. The accident happened when Marcus was 22 and Daniel was 19. Marcus had been driving them home from a party, sober but tired, and he drifted into the other lane for just a second. The crash left Daniel paralyzed from the waist down. Marcus had tried to be there, had paid for every surgery, every treatment, every experimental therapy, but Daniel had pushed him away, said he didn't want Marcus's guilt money, said he needed space to figure out who he was now. That space had turned into 2 decades of silence. Marcus had thrown himself into work, building his empire as some kind of penance, as if enough success could erase what he'd done. He'd told himself Daniel was better off without him. He'd been lying to himself for 20 years. Porter walked over and sat directly in front of Marcus, still watching him with those calm, knowing eyes. Marcus slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, and for the first time since the accident, he let himself cry. Not the silent tears he'd shed alone in his penthouse, but the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and broken, the kind that sounds like it's being ripped out of you. Porter moved closer and rested his head on Marcus's knee, patient and steady. They sat like that for an hour. When Marcus finally stood up, his eyes were red, but something inside him felt different, lighter maybe, or just less locked down. He looked at Porter. "You ready to come home with me, boy?" Porter's tail wagged once, a small gesture that felt like permission. Marcus signed the adoption papers, loaded Porter into the Mercedes, which now seemed absurdly fancy and stupid, and drove home in silence. When they got to the penthouse, Porter explored every room while Marcus sat on the couch and read Daniel's letter 17 more times. Over the next weeks, everything changed. Porter didn't care about Marcus's money or his success or his reputation. He just wanted walks and food and someone to sit with. Marcus started leaving work at 5 instead of 9, started taking Porter to the park every morning before sunrise, started talking to other dog owners, actual conversations, with strangers about ordinary things like weather and leash training, and the best brand of kibble. He found Daniel's social media and spent hours scrolling through photos, seeing the life his brother had built without him. Daniel had become a counselor for other people with spinal injuries, had gotten married, had lived a full, meaningful life, had forgiven him. 3 months after adopting Porter, Marcus sold his company, not because it was failing, but because he realized he'd built it for all the wrong reasons. He started a foundation in Daniel's name that provided service dogs to people with disabilities, fully funded, no questions asked. He moved out of the penthouse into a house with a yard where Porter could run. He started dating again, real dates with women who wanted to know him, not his bank account. And every night before bed, he'd sit with Porter and talk to Daniel, saying all the things he'd been too afraid or too proud or too broken to say when his brother was alive. Porter would listen, head tilted as if he understood every word. Maybe he did. Maybe that was the gift Daniel had really left him. Not just a dog, but a reminder that healing doesn't require perfection, just presence. That forgiveness isn't something you earn through suffering, but something you accept through grace. That love, the real kind, doesn't ask you to be invincible. It just asks you to be there. The walls we build to protect ourselves become the prisons that isolate us. And sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't climbing higher, it's finally letting someone in.